Today on the Ferguson home, we're going to discuss a topic that affects our family every day. And if we're honest, it affects our family life every moment of every day.
Today on the Ferguson home, we want to share with you, our listeners, that I am a type 1 diabetic, and so we as a family have to deal with chronic illness all the time. And today we know that we're not alone, that there are a lot of couples who struggle with this in their marriage. And so we want to answer the question, how do you deal with chronic illness in your marriage in a way that doesn't tank your marriage in the process? And so I guess let's start off by telling a little bit of our story so you know about our journey. We had been married about 4 years when, at the age of 25...
I was pregnant. We had probably a 10-month-old baby, and I was pregnant with number 2.
And my health started to have weird symptoms. I was starting to lose weight.
While I was gaining weight.
I was drinking water all the time, having to get up in the middle of the night and use the restroom, and there was just all of these strange symptoms in my life. I hadn't changed anything about my diet or my exercise or anything. Just wasn't feeling well. And I know at one point you said, you know what, you need to go get a physical.
I could not take it anymore that he was losing as I was gaining in the pregnancy.
So I went in to see the doctor, and they did a checkup, and it wasn't about, 5 minutes into that doctor's visit that the doctor came into the room and said, "Keith, you're diabetic." And I said, "What? I don't have any diabetes in my family. I've never thought about diabetes. How is this even possible?"
And it wasn't even a question. It wasn't borderline or, like you get gestational diabetes and then...
Or pre-diabetes. It was you're diabetic.
Yeah.
And so at that point, usually when you get diagnosed in your 20s, they say, "Oh, you're type 2 diabetic," and began to treat me that way. And honestly, I had kind of a long honeymoon period where I was able to manage it with just a little bit of medication or diet or exercise or those kind of things. And since I thought I was type 2, then we thought, okay, this would be kind of our future. But then a couple years later, we moved down here to the Austin area where we live now. And I remember one of my early appointments with my endocrinologist here in Austin. They had done blood work, and she said, "You've told me that you're type 2, but actually when I'm looking at your blood work and what your body's producing, I think actually, Keith, you're type 1, that your body's not making any insulin." And so that started a whole new journey for us in our relationship where I needed insulin, and so kind of started slowly, and I needed more and more until now I'm just fully insulin dependent as a diabetic, and in the last year or so have moved from shots to having a pump and having a Dexcom that helps me to monitor my blood sugars. And so it has been quite a ride over these last 15 years of learning how to live as a diabetic. So what I want to share to you, if you're watching this video and you're the person in the marriage who is facing chronic illness, maybe you're like me and you're on this journey of trying to figure out how to live with some kind of disease or chronic problem in your life, let me share a few suggestions that I have found beneficial in my own life. And the first is to just really accept reality. When you're facing chronic illness, there's kind of this ongoing dialogue you have with yourself where you say, why me? Why am I facing this? Wouldn't life be so much better if I didn't have this thing?
It's like the Eeyore complex.
Well, and part of it is just, especially in the moments that are hard, maybe that's for you, you're in treatment for some kind of illness. For me, it's when my alarm's beeping in the middle of the night and waking us up, or there's some thing that I want to do that I can't do because of diabetes. And in those moments, I can really get down on myself and say, why am I dealing with this? But somebody told me a few years ago that I was wasting a lot of energy just saying, what if this was different?
Yeah.
And that I needed to just accept this was the reality that I was living in and make the best of the situation that I was facing. And for some reason, that just really helped me. It helped me get out of a little bit of a funk I was in about dealing with diabetes and just realizing that I needed to accept reality. Second thing that I would say that's helped me is choosing the practice of gratitude in the midst of suffering with illness. And, for me, there are so many things in my life to be grateful for. And as a Christian, this is a practice that has a long history in the church of just the practice of Thanksgiving. And the Bible talks about to give thanks in everything. But man, when you're facing illness, it's like one of the hardest things to do is to be grateful. But for me, like taking time every day to say, God, I'm so thankful for my wife. I'm thankful for my family. I'm thankful for the fact that you put food on the table for us, to provide for our needs. And just all the things that I have to be grateful for in my life.
Thankful for the technology.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful as his wife for the technology that allows him to still be here with me.
Absolutely. Yeah. To live in a time where for me as a diabetic, if I'd lived 50 years ago, this would have been a totally different journey and experience that we would be on as a couple. And so, just choosing gratitude for the things, the blessings in your life, especially when you're dealing with something that's just kind of around all the time, can be a real challenge. And then the final thing, and this one is really close to my heart, and maybe this is unique to being diabetic. I don't know if everybody who has chronic illness deals with this, but for me it's a huge issue. And that is to not live in shame about the fact that your body's broken, that you're dealing with some kind of illness. Because for me, I can really get to a place of feeling like I've done something wrong or there's something wrong with me that's contributed to this illness, rather than just saying I live in a broken world and this is part of our experience of living in a broken world. It's so easy to personalize it, and then you just bury yourself in shame, like I'm ashamed to tell people that I have this. I don't want people to know I'm dealing with it. It's just this really strange psychology that comes with illness. And I guess I would just share with you, if you're a person who is facing chronic illness, that it can be really helpful to see a counselor, to talk to somebody about some of those emotions and the things that you're feeling, in order to not bring all of those emotions, directly to bear on your spouse in your marriage.
And then as a spouse, my perspective is a little different as I'm watching my husband deal with this every day. I think just some things that have helped us along the way is, first of all, to have empathy. Just feel what they're going through is hard, and there's been times where I felt at this where I'm like, okay, stop complaining already. But for the most part, just choose to listen, and I don't know what else as far as just how I show you empathy.
I think just understanding that there's times where your spouse is going to be down, and not just feeling the physical pain that they're going through, but some of the emotional pain that they're feeling, allowing them seasons where they're going to feel discouraged or down, and walking with them in that. Yeah.
And I've gone to a counselor with you for that, but this is harder for me sometimes because I like to be positive and happy, and so if he's down for a little while, I can roll, and then it gets harder to stay empathetic for the long haul. But just to continue to remember that, just put myself in his shoes, and if I was having, I'll go into the bathroom sometimes as he's having to put his pump on, just to remember, like, that hurts. He's just having to give himself shots all the time. And just not to forget that that's heavy. If I had to watch my kids go through that, I would be crying every time. And I know a lot of parents do. And so I want to have that same empathy when I'm watching my husband have to go through that every time. And just remember, it's really hard what he's dealing with. And then the second thing is to learn the language. Take time to know the different pieces of equipment that Keith uses, the different types of insulin, and we subscribe to a couple of different diabetic magazines, so I take time just to read them, to stay up to date with what research is being done, and just to be able to have conversation when he wants to talk about it, that I can enter into that conversation with him and he doesn't feel isolated. And then the third thing is that I own the problem with him. It is not just his burden to carry, because we are one. When we said I do, what hurts him hurts me. And so I would just say I've heard for different circumstances, not just health, but I've heard people say, well, that's their problem. They've got to deal with it. And I would just really caution you in this, that your spouse, their body, when it hurts, you should hurt with them. And so just remember, it's your problem together, and you were in it together, and you own it with them, and you walk beside them, and you are their biggest cheerleader, and cry with them when they're sad. So, yeah.
And part of that, of owning the issue with your spouse, it's not like you can own the solution. Your spouse has got to do what they need to do to get healthy and to deal with the chronic health issue. So you can't fix it for them, but you can join into the battle with them. Yeah. And I think one of the things that we've learned, and this is not just applicable to illness, but is that really fighting for health is a joint effort in marriage. And so we want to encourage all of you in your marriage that part of being one physically is working to be healthy together. Yeah. Yeah. And that may be what you eat, maybe working out together, getting enough sleep, but all those things impact my diabetes. And if you're dealing with illness, then all those things impact you because it's tied to your physical health.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about after his type 1 diagnosis, a couple of years later. I feel like God's been really gracious to us to give it to us in stages, small bites, so that we can process, because each one has been hard in its own way. But the latest one was that he also has another autoimmune disorder that kind of goes along with type 1 often, and that's celiac. And so that brought on a whole new set of cooking differently and making sure that we have gluten-free options for every meal, and then working out. And so for him, working out plays a huge role in his counts being stable. And so just to watch, and if I see that he's working a whole lot and he's skipping his workouts, without nagging him, just to call him up and be like, hey, let's go for a workout today, or let's go for a run, or just to be paying attention to his rhythms and routines, and how can I enter in without making him feel bad, but just come along beside him and us have fun together while we're taking care of him.
And if you're the person, again, dealing with a chronic health issue, you've got to be open and honest with your spouse about what you're going through, what you're dealing with. And doesn't mean you just vomit all your emotions and everything on them. But I think because, again, you're one, you need to share what you're going through.
Yeah, and it was, if this is diabetic related or specific, but even the other day he was sharing with me, because oftentimes it'll be beeping in the middle of the night, and sometimes I don't get the readings on my phone like I'm supposed to, and so I'll ask him, is it high or low, or what's going on? And he was saying, opening up, that oftentimes that makes him feel the shame, like he's done something to cause his counts to go up high or go low, and that he should be more on top of it. And that was never my heart. My heart's just to know, okay, if it's low in the middle of the night, I'll go down and get him a banana or orange juice or something to bring it up. And so my question is never to embarrass or shame him, but it was really good for me to understand how he's interpreting it often, and so that I will just kind of watch a little bit and be more careful.
Yeah, for sure. It's complex. It's a journey, and it's one we want to encourage you. And we want to encourage you. Maybe if you're facing an illness, leave us a comment below. We'd love to know how to pray for you and what you're struggling with in your marriage. And here's our action item for today on the Ferguson home. Share something with your spouse about your own health that will help them to understand what you're dealing with. And maybe it's something you've talked about before, but something's changed in your health, or maybe it's something that you're facing that you've never shared with your spouse before, and this would be a great time to open up about that.
Yeah.